There are some days in your life that divide everything into before and after. For me, that day was quiet. Too quiet. No sirens. No crowd. No voices calling my name. Just the sound of the wind brushing past gravestones and the hollow echo of my footsteps as I walked alone toward two caskets. One was for my sister. The other was for my husband. No one else came. Not a single friend for my sister. Not a single child for their father. Just me. I stood there with two bouquets in my hands, shaking so badly I could barely hold onto the stems. One bouquet for the sister who once brushed my hair before school. One bouquet for the man who had been the father of my children for over 40 years. And there I was, alone. My children had chosen parties over their father's funeral. They sent text messages. They sent excuses. They sent apologies filled with empty words. But none of them sent their footsteps down that long gravel path beside me. As the caskets were lowered into the ground, the silence felt heavier than any scream I had ever heard. I remember thinking, maybe this is what the end of a family sounds like. Not explosions, not shouting, just quiet abandonment. What led to that moment did not happen overnight. It took years. It took slow drifting. It took choices that seemed small at first, but grew into distances that no bridge could easily cross. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt forgotten by the people you raised, or if someone you love slipped out of your life quietly without a fight, I invite you to stay with me for this story. And if my words touch your heart even a little, I hope you'll take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this live on through those who listen. Now let me take you back to where it all truly began. Long before the funerals, long before the silence, long before I learned how heavy loneliness can become. I grew up with my sister in a small house that always smelled like soap and warm bread. She was 3 years older than me, strong-willed, stubborn, protective in ways she never admitted out loud. If someone teased me at school, she was the one who stood between us. If I cried at night, she was the one who slid into my bed and whispered that everything would be all right. We grew up believing family meant never walking alone. She married young. I married a few years later. Our lives moved in parallel lines. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, children learning to walk in our living rooms. My husband worked long hours. My sister worked 2 jobs. We were tired women, but we stayed close. Or at least, I believed we did. My children arrived one after the other. First my son, then my daughter. I built my whole world around them. Their school mornings, their scraped knees, their nighttime fears. I made sure they had warm meals, clean clothes, and a mother who was always present. I thought that was enough. I thought love alone would shape who they became. My husband was not a perfect man, but he provided. He showed up to games when he could. He worked through illness, through exhaustion, through disappointments he never spoke about. He loved our children in the way he knew how. Quietly, stiffly sometimes, but genuinely. As the years passed, I noticed small changes. A skipped dinner here, a forgotten birthday call there. My children grew busy with their lives, careers, relationships, social circles that did not always include their aging parents. I told myself It was natural. I told myself this was what success looked like. Children growing independent, children moving on. My sister, though, she changed in quieter ways. Her husband left her after 20 years. Quietly, no grand fight, just packed a bag and disappeared into another life. After that, she grew more distant. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rare. Every time I asked if she was okay, she would answer the same way. "I'm fine," she would say, but I could hear the tiredness behind the words. Years passed like that. Then one winter morning, my sister collapsed in her kitchen. A neighbor found her too late. The phone call came while I was folding laundry. I remember the sock slipping from my hand and hitting the floor, while the voice on the other end kept speaking words that no longer made sense. She was gone. I expected people to come. I expected cousins, co-workers, old friends, neighbors. My sister had lived her whole life serving others. Surely someone would show up. No one did. And the same unbearable truth waited for me when my husband passed only 3 weeks later from a sudden stroke. 3 weeks. 2 funerals. No crowd at either. My children didn't come to either one. That is where the rest of this story truly lives. In the space between those empty rows of chairs. In the hollow places where family should have stood. And in the long road that followed, where grief taught me lessons I never wanted to learn. After the funerals, the house felt different. Not just quiet, but hollow. The kind of quiet that rings in your ears even when you try to distract yourself. My sister's house was locked and dark across town. My husband's chair sat empty in our living room, and the phone, the one I kept checking, stayed silent for days. I expected my children to call after the funerals. I expected them to ask how I was holding up. I expected regret. I expected something. But days passed with nothing more than short messages. "Sorry, Mom. Things got hectic. Couldn't get out of town in time. We'll visit soon, okay?" Soon became a word that no longer meant anything. In the quiet of the evenings, I began recalling things I had once brushed aside. Moments that didn't seem important back then, but now pressed against my chest with sudden meaning. The first time my son skipped Thanksgiving. Friendsgiving, he had called it. I told myself he was young. Let him enjoy his youth. The first Christmas, my daughter sent a gift through the mail instead of coming home. Work is crazy this year. I told myself she was building her career. The birthdays forgotten. The visits shortened. The phone calls answered with half attention. I kept forgiving. I kept understanding. I kept making excuses for them because that's what mothers do. We are trained to soften the world for our children, even when they harden it for us. My husband used to notice things I refused to see. "They're slipping away," he once said quietly while staring at the dark television screen. "No," I told him, "they're just busy. That's life." But he was right, and I was afraid to admit it. My sister saw it too. "They don't visit like they used to," she said one afternoon as we sat at my table drinking tea. "They will," I replied quickly. "They always come back around." She stirred her cup slowly. "I hope so." I didn't realize at the time how lonely she already was. After her husband left, she tried to stay strong. She went to work, came home, watched television alone, and slept. That became her routine. Friends drifted away without drama. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped. Loneliness does not always enter with noise. Sometimes it arrives gently and stays unnoticed until it owns the whole house. I was busy with my family, busy with my children. I believed my sister was simply adjusting. I believed she was fine because that was what she kept telling me. "I'm okay," she said every time I asked, and I chose to believe her. Then one afternoon, I stopped by her house without calling first. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I used the spare key she had once given me and stepped inside. The house was silent. Dishes were still in the sink. A half cup of cold coffee sat on the table. The television was off. The air felt heavy. She wasn't home. Later that night, the phone rang. That was the day I lost my sister. 3 weeks later, I lost my husband. The way grief stacked on top of itself was something I had never known before. One funeral had already cracked me open. The second one almost broke me in half. My sister's funeral first. I stood inside the chapel holding a single bouquet. The chairs were empty. The minister cleared his throat awkwardly before beginning the service. The echo of his voice bounced off the walls because there were no whispers, no coughing, no shifting bodies. I remember wondering if I had arrived on the wrong day. She helped so many people. I whispered to the minister afterward. Surely someone knew her. He gave me a sad look. Sometimes the quietest souls leave the quietest spaces behind. I carried that sentence with me like a bruise. Then came my husband's funeral. I called my children the night before. "Please," I said, my voice barely holding together. "He was your father." "I know," my daughter replied, "but we already made plans." "Plans?" I repeated. "There's a beach party this weekend. Everyone already booked hotels. Canceling would be complicated." My son's excuse was different, but it landed the same. "Mom, I already RSVP'd to a friend's wedding. Flights are expensive. I just can't make it." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply said, "All right." When the day came, 2 caskets were lowered into the earth on the same week by the same pair of trembling hands. Mine. I sat between them on a cold metal chair while the wind pulled at my coat and dried the tears on my face before they could fall far. I spoke the final words for both of them. Alone. That was the day something inside me changed permanently. Grief does many things, but the deepest grief does not scream. It teaches silence. Afterward, I returned to the house that no longer felt like home. I set my sister's photo on the mantel beside my husband's. 2 lives, 2 losses, 2 empty spaces that no noise could fill. My children checked in with simple messages. Nothing deep. Nothing that required them to feel the full weight of what had happened. Weeks passed, then months. Then, one afternoon, my daughter called. "Mom, I need you to watch my dog next weekend," she said cheerfully. My chest tightened. "Not to visit?" I asked softly. "Well, that too, I guess," she replied casually. "But really, it's just for the weekend. We're going out of town." I agreed, because saying no felt harder than swallowing the hurt again. They came quickly. They left quickly, and the house returned to its hollow echo once more. My son visited once that year. He stayed one night, spent most of it on his phone, hugged me stiffly before leaving. "Love you, Mom," he said automatically. The words floated in the air, without weight. Time moved differently after that. Days stretched, nights blurred together. My reflection aged faster than I expected. Grief has a way of carving itself into wrinkles. I joined a small church group to avoid sitting alone on Sundays. I planted flowers in the yard my husband once cared for. I learned to sit with silence without fighting it. But something inside me kept asking the same question. How did I become the only one left? Where did my family go? And why did they choose everything else, but not us? The first real silence between my children and me ended one afternoon when my son called without warning. I was sitting by the window, watching the leaves move in the wind, doing nothing in particular. That had become my routine. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Mom," he said. His voice carried something unfamiliar. Hesitation. "Yes," I replied. There was a short pause. Then he said he was coming to town, just for a few days. He didn't say why. 2 hours later, my daughter called with the same message. She and her husband were driving in, also just for a few days. I sat there long after the calls ended, listening to the ticking clock on the wall. The silence felt different this time, heavy in a way I couldn't name. They arrived the next evening. 2 separate cars, 2 separate lives. They stood on the porch waiting for me to open the door, like visitors instead of family. I hugged them both. The hugs were polite, careful. Their bodies leaned in, but their hearts stayed back. We sat in the living room where their father used to sit. Nobody chose his chair. Nobody looked at it either. At first, they talked about small things. Traffic, weather, work, their vacations, their friends, their plans. I listened quietly. None of it included me. Finally, I spoke. "You both missed the funerals." The words landed between us like a dropped glass. My daughter's eyes fell to her hands. My son swallowed hard. "We know," he said. My voice stayed calm, almost too calm. "Tell me why." They exchanged a look, the kind people share when they don't want to be the first to speak. My daughter went first. Things were complicated. Life got busy. My son added. I nodded slowly. "Busy enough to miss your father's burial." Neither of them answered. I stood up and walked to the mantel. I picked up my husband's photo, then my sister's. I turned back and faced them. "These 2 people loved you without limits," I said, and they were buried by one pair of hands. The room felt smaller, tighter. My son rubbed the back of his neck. We didn't think it would happen so fast. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I didn't let it fall. Death rarely asks for permission, I said. My daughter's voice shook. "We were scared." "Of what?" I asked. "Of facing it." I set the photos back down, gently. "And now?" I asked. She didn't answer. Later that night, I made dinner like I always did, even though my hands trembled while holding the spoon. We ate together at the same table where they once fought over desserts and seat positions. Now, no one spoke much. After dinner, my daughter followed me into the kitchen. "Mom, we didn't think you'd be this quiet," she said carefully. I looked at her. "What did you expect?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought you'd be angry, or crying, or something." I said, "for a long time. Then I ran out of energy." She pressed her lips together. We felt ashamed. That feeling arrived late. I replied, "That night." They both stayed in their old rooms. I lay awake listening to footsteps in a house that finally felt full again, but not warm. The next morning, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. I didn't mean to listen, but their voices traveled through the still house. "She's different," my daughter said. "She doesn't look at us the same," my son replied. I sat on the bed and closed my eyes. They were right. Later that day, they suggested a family lunch. A restaurant, public, bright, no hard conversations. At the restaurant, they laughed louder than they needed to. They spoke about memories like they were flipping through photographs that no longer belonged to them. Halfway through the meal, my son finally asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I set my fork down slowly. "I buried your father alone," I said quietly. "So yes, I am surviving, but I am not the same." The table fell silent. My daughter reached for my hand. I let her touch it, but the familiar comfort was gone. That evening, they told me the real reason they came. They were planning to move farther away, out of state, permanent. "We wanted to tell you in person," my daughter said. I nodded. "You already live far away," I replied. Distance didn't start with a move. They stayed 2 more days. On the final morning, they packed their cars. Hugs were exchanged. Promises were made. Calls were promised. As they drove away, I stood on the porch and watched until the street was empty again. That night, I cried, not over their leaving, but over the truth finally settling inside me. My children were no longer mine in the way they once were. Weeks later, another call came. My daughter was pregnant. "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother," she said excitedly. I smiled through the phone, but a strange fear stirred inside me. Weeks passed, months. Updates came through photos instead of visits. Then one afternoon, several months later, I finally traveled to see them. The house was new, bigger than mine, bright, modern. They greeted me at the door. Nervous smiles, polite hugs. Inside, everything was quiet. "Where's the baby?" I asked gently. My daughter hesitated. "She's sleeping," she said quickly. "You can hold her tomorrow." I nodded. We sat and talked. I pretended not to notice the way she avoided eye contact, the way my son-in-law stayed unusually nervous. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I walked quietly down the hallway toward the nursery, and that was when I saw it. My daughter, standing near the front door, holding something wrapped in a blanket. A woman I had never seen before stood before her. Their voices were low, urgent. Then my daughter placed the baby into the stranger's arms. My breath stopped in my chest. The door opened. The stranger stepped outside. And my granddaughter, the child I was told I could hold tomorrow, was gone. I stood frozen at the end of the hallway, my body unable to move, my breath trapped somewhere between my chest and my throat. The front door closed softly. Not a slam, not a rush, just a quiet click that felt louder than any scream. I didn't collapse. I didn't shout. I simply walked back to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands folded in my lap like a child waiting for punishment. My heart beat so hard I could hear it. By the time morning came, I had already lived 1,000 questions and no answers. At breakfast, my daughter placed a cup of coffee in front of me with shaking hands. "You didn't sleep, did you?" she asked. "No," I said. My son didn't look up from his plate. "You lied to me," I said quietly. Neither of them spoke. "I saw her," I continued. "I saw you hand my grandbaby to a stranger." My daughter's face went pale. My son pushed his chair back slowly. "It isn't what you think," he said. I let out a slow breath. "Then tell me what it is." They exchanged another look. That look again. The one that carries guilt. My daughter's eyes filled. "We never meant for you to find out this way." "Then how?" I asked. "On a birthday card." She broke down then. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. My son finally spoke. "We gave the baby up." The words sounded unreal, like something spoken in another room. "You gave her up?" I repeated. "We couldn't afford her," my daughter cried. "We're drowning in debt. The house, the loans, the business failing. We thought adoption would give her a better life." My voice stayed calm, even though something inside me cracked wide open. "And the stranger?" I asked. "The adoptive mother," my son said. My hands trembled on the table. "So, you let me travel hundreds of miles to meet a child you had already decided to erase from your lives. We thought you wouldn't accept it." My daughter sobbed. I watched my sister lower into the ground alone. I said softly, "I buried your father with no one beside me. You thought I wouldn't accept losing a child I hadn't even held yet." The room fell silent. "Why lie about it?" I asked. My son stared at the floor. We were ashamed. I pushed my chair back and stood. My legs felt weak, but I didn't fall. "You took her from me before she ever reached my arms," I said. "Then you made me sleep under the same roof where she disappeared." My daughter rushed toward me. "Mom, please." I raised my hand gently, not in anger, in exhaustion. "I need air," I said. I walked outside and stood on the porch, breathing in slow, shaky breaths. The sky looked too bright for what was happening. Birds sang like nothing had changed. Behind me, the door creaked open. "I failed her," my daughter whispered. I turned my head just enough to look at her. "No," I said. "You feared for her, but you betrayed me." She cried harder. That night, I packed my bag. I didn't announce it. I didn't argue. I simply left before the sun rose. Weeks went by with no calls. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was the adoptive mother. She found my number through the agency. "She keeps looking for a face she remembers," the woman said. "We showed her your photo from the hospital." My knees nearly gave out. "She knows me?" I whispered. "She quiets when she sees your face." The woman said. I traveled again. This time, my hands shook not from fear, but from hope. At the small meeting room, the door opened, and there she was, my granddaughter. in the stranger's arms. Her eyes met mine, and she smiled. Something inside me healed without permission. I held her that day for the first time. Her small heart beat against mine. Her fingers curled around mine. Without fear, the adoptive mother watched quietly from beside us. "You can visit her," she told me, "as long as you'd like." Tears fell freely now. When I returned home, I called my children. They came, not proudly, not confidently. They came in shame. They sat across from me like frightened children. "She's alive," I told them. "She's loved. She's safe." They both cried. "I forgave you once for leaving me alone at death." I said, "Do not ask me to forgive you for abandoning life. We want to try to be better," my son whispered. "Then start by telling the truth," I said, and for the first time in many years, they did. They didn't fix everything in one visit. Healing is not a switch you flip. It is something you build slowly, like stacking fragile glass one careful piece at a time. Some days it feels steady. Some days it feels like it might shatter again. My children began coming by every week. At first, they spoke softly, like guests in a stranger's home. Then slowly, old habits returned. Laughter slipped back into the walls. Coffee cups stayed longer on the table. Silence no longer pressed so hard against my ears. And my granddaughter, she grew. The adoptive mother kept her promise. I visited often. I watched her take her first steps across a soft living room rug that was not mine, but still felt sacred. I watched her learn to clap, to laugh, to reach for me with both hands stretched wide. Every visit felt like a gift I was never supposed to receive. My children asked to come once. I said yes. They stood in the doorway unsure, just as I once had. My granddaughter studied their faces quietly, then returned her attention to the toy in her hands. "She doesn't know us," my daughter whispered. "No," I replied, "but she knows love. You gave that to her by letting her go." My daughter cried that day in a way I had never seen before. Not loud, not broken, just real. Then one afternoon, the adoptive mother pulled me aside. "She calls you Nana?" She smiled. I laughed through tears. Time moved forward, not the way I imagined, but the way it chose. Seasons changed. My house filled again with voices on holidays. My son learned how to speak without hiding. My daughter learned how to listen without fear. Not perfectly, but honestly. One evening, after dinner, they both sat beside me on the couch. "We don't deserve the space you gave us," my son said. "No," I replied, "but you needed it." My daughter took my hand. "Do you forgive us?" she asked. I looked at them, truly looked, not as the children who failed me, but as the children who were still learning how not to. "I forgave you long before you asked," I said. Their shoulders dropped at the same time. Relief has a weight to it. Years passed. My granddaughter grew tall, strong, kind. She learned the truth when she was old enough to hold it gently. She never rejected them. She simply accepted all of us as part of her story. On her 18th birthday, she invited everyone. At the table sat my children. Across from them sat the woman who raised her. and beside her sat me, 4 worlds at one table. She stood and raised her glass. I was loved twice, she said, by the ones who brought me into this world, and by the ones who carried me through it, and by the grandmother who never stopped waiting with open hands. No one spoke. We didn't have words big enough. Only tears, only peace, only reunion. And now here I am, still breathing, still forgiving, still loving. If my story reached you today, if it wrapped around something heavy in your heart, I ask you softly to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so these stories can keep finding those who feel alone. Because healing is real, forgiveness is possible, and no matter how empty the chairs once were, the table can fill again.